I left this for 4 days. Don't do that. That is the issue that I had, okay? Hey, welcome back to my channel. It's Wendy here from Toonpish Crafts, and I hope you're doing okay. This video is about an inlay that I've made, Dragon's Eye inlay, which is the opposite side of the coin to the Dragon Eye mould that I made a couple of weeks ago. And I've put in there a few examples of how I would use the inlay, but I haven't showed that it can be used with polymer clay and air dry clay. I used to use polymer clay a long time ago, and I was always hunting around for silicone inlays, which were really hard to get hold of. Well, these silicone inlays can be used with those mediums as well, although I don't show you in the video. But on a side note, I just want to apologise for all of my American friends out there, and I apologise that I can't sell anything from my website to you guys at this time. I don't know if you're aware, but at the end of the month, the tariffs system for the UK and USA are changing. And because they're changing, if I was to sell something and send it to you now, and it arrived at the end or at the beginning of September, you may get an $80 tariff on whatever you've ordered. And bearing in mind, it could be just a £6 pot of colour. So I don't want to put anyone in that situation. Therefore, I've halted my USA sales at this time. Now, I am aware that the UK Royal Mail service are getting everything in place for it to be sorted out by the beginning of September. So hopefully it should not take long. Hopefully I'll be able to sell again to all my American friends at the beginning of September. Fingers crossed on that one. It's out of my hands, I'm afraid, and like I said, I don't want anyone to have to pay $80 for a very small parcel, so that's not going to happen. So anyway, now we've got that sorted out, let's have a look at some dragon eyes. So this is the Dragon Eye mould I made in the previous video, and this is the inlay. Now this one is cut down to size because I'm going to be using it in a small mould. I needed to cut around the edges to fit it in that mould. They do come a little bit larger. Now I'm going to use some Pritt Stick. I've used this before. Pritt Stick is a good way to secure your inlay in a mould so that no resin seeps underneath it. I've used it loads of times. However, I did have an issue on this occasion. I make sure I get all those edges with the glue, and there's something gritty there. So I had to make sure that came out because we don't want that underneath the inlay. I'm placing it inside the mould and I'm letting it dry. Now I only need to let it dry for an hour, maybe 2 at a push. I left this for 4 days. Don't do that. That is the issue that I had, okay? 4 days later, I pour clear resin over the top of the inlay. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it's still stuck down. The Pritt Stick has dried and it's done its job. But we'll come to what happened later. I do spray it with isopropyl alcohol and I leave it to cure. The following day I can demould. This is the following day, and this is when I realised that the Pritt Stick and the inlay have made the mould a little out of shape. I've left that in for 4 days, and I'm pretty sure, even though I could clean the glue off, the glue was the issue. It dried out and shrank back, and I think that's why it's warped the mould. So don't leave it for 4 days. The resin has gone underneath the inlay, not right the way around, but as if I hadn't used any glue at all. So if you're going to use the Pritt Stick, make sure you pour the resin as soon as that glue is dry and don't leave it for 4 days like I did. Anyway, I can snip away the resin that's poured underneath the inlay okay, which was how I used to do it before I used the Pritt Stick anyway. Honestly, there's no harm done. Just don't snip the inlay. It takes a little bit of effort, however, not too much. just enough to pull the inlay out. And although I thought I needed to snip a little bit more, it came out anyway. By the way, if you want to see how to make some of these inlays, I'll link a video in the top right hand corner. That might help you. Once the inlay is out, the inlay is absolutely fine, and I just need to clean up around the edges with some snippers. That didn't take long at all. It was just a little bit of an extra step. And I am so over the moon with this piece, hands down. It's one of my favourite pieces of all time, and it's just going to stay as is. I do think next time I might put a little shade of colour in the clear resin, however, just to give it an edge. So that was make 1, really, really simple. This is make 2. Now sometimes I pour a clear layer of resin on the bottom of a mould and let it cure before I do an inlay pour. On this occasion, it's cooled down at the moment here, so I'm using a heat gun to warm up this resin. And I figured I'm going to do it straight as is. I know the inlay is quite thick, but it still won't touch the bottom of this mould when it floats on top of the resin. Now this is the normal size of the inlay. You can see where it's got a bit more width to it. I squirt it with isopropyl alcohol so that it has a liquid on the surface and won't keep air trapped in there. Anything that's dry will hang on to air bubbles. I found that this method works so much better than any method I've tried in the past. Top tip. And the following day, it is completely cured up, so I can take out my inlay. Because it's been laying on top, silicone naturally floats on resin. There is no areas to clean up around the outside edge, and I have a beautiful inlay design. Now I could leave it there. I could leave it like I did the first piece, but this is to show you can do other things with it as well. Now this resin has completely cured. It is not sticky at all. So I'm going to use some metal leaf size glue and cover the entire piece with the metal size glue. Metal size is a gilding glue, really thin too. Goes completely clear when it dries. This type of glue is used for antique restoration, for gold leafing and such. 45 minutes later, you can't even see the glue anymore, and that's the point. You need to not see it to know that it's cured. I'm going to use some wyvern flakes, and I'm going to cover the entire piece with wyvern flakes. Now I did put quite a lot of flakes on this piece. You don't really need that many, but I was being generous, I think. I'm going to use a fluffy brush. Some people use makeup brushes. You can use whatever brush you want, whatever you've got to hand, and push those flakes down onto the glue. By the way, when I poured the resin in this, there was a little bit of room to pour a back colour. So I do make sure I go round the outside edge as well with the flakes. Now, as I said, I had too many flakes in there, so I didn't want to waste them, and all the loose flakes got shaken off and pushed back into the pot. Nothing wrong with them, I can use them again. Once I've completely gone over the whole piece with a firmer brush to burnish that colour into that glue, I'm then going to use a cotton bud and just take off the iris part with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol or water. That should come off quite easily. And as it stands out, it's pretty easy to get to. That iris is going to be black. And then I'm going to use black 2-part epoxy resin for the back part. Just enough to cover the entire design and up to the top of the mould. I spray it with isopropyl alcohol and let it cure. The following day I can demould and see how this piece looks, and I can already see I'm in love with this colour. Wyvern, purple, blue, green, absolutely beautiful flakes. Stunning. These flakes are available on toonpish.com. Unfortunately at the moment, as you heard, I can't send to America, but hopefully that will be sorted out very soon. But the colours in that flake are absolutely magnificent, and that design of that eye I absolutely adore. So moving on to make 3. Now again, I have my inlay and I can see that the iris is indented in the inlay, which means it will stick out on the final piece. So I'm going to use some colours. These are the Tiny Turner colours. I have Arcane, Alchemy, Toonpish colour Purple Magenta, Toonpish colour Copper Gold and Starlight. And to start with, I'm going to use a little isopropyl alcohol and Arcane, and I'm just going to colour the iris. Because you're creating a liquid powder with the isopropyl alcohol, it kind of washes in. Let it dry because the alcohol evaporates. The powder stays where it is because it's powder, it doesn't evaporate. And then you can clean up after if you need to. And in this case, I just wiped a cotton bud over the iris. Now I'm going to use one of the holographic chameleon pigments. They're both holographic and chameleon, and this is Copper Gold. And I'm using again the isopropyl alcohol to make it liquidy. Now I just want to go around the outside of this eye. Obviously I've got a little bit of colour elsewhere, but that's fine. I'll show you a way of sorting that out later. I want this colour to go into the cracks of this inlay. I came up with this isopropyl alcohol idea over 5 years ago. I've been doing YouTube now for 5 years. Isn't that incredible? It's gone so quickly. Anyway, I will link the video, which was my second ever video, in the top right hand corner. It's a bit cringy for me, but it does show the technique in full. Once I've gone over the eye, I realise I really want it to go over the rest of the piece as well. So I'm going right the way over with this diluted mica over the entire piece. You can see on the close-ups the holographicness of this mica powder. It does show best in sunlight, believe me. I only want it to go into the low areas, and because it's watery, it will fall down into those lower areas. It does also leave a residue on the higher areas, so I'm spraying the entire thing with isopropyl alcohol. That washes off the higher areas and pushes that colour down into the lower areas. And then I just let it dry for about 10 minutes. Moving on now, I'm going to use the Purple Magenta from the Toonpish set. Again, chameleon and holographic in one. And I'm going to colour the inside of the eye. This is completely dry now. There is no alcohol on this piece. It has dried out lovely. So I'm colouring the eyeball itself with this colour. Now if you think colour combinations, a green eyeball, a dark or light blue eyeball, absolutely stunning ideas. This is just the colour I chose. I then go on and use Arcane around the outside edge. You can use whatever colours you want. I do think, personally, that chameleon colours work better on 3D images because you get a shimmer of different colours. That's my own personal preference. Doesn't mean to say you have to do that. You can do completely flat colours if that's what you were looking for. I'm showing you how I coloured this piece, and this is the system that I'm using. Now I'm taking some tape, I've rolled it up so it's sticky on both sides, and I'm just going around the outside edge, getting rid of some of the Arcane from the top areas. It's not going to take it all away. I'm not completely getting rid of that colour. I'm kind of giving it a patchy look. Mica won't stick to mica. It'll only stick to the bare silicone parts. I then go over with Starlight and I dust those areas that now don't have any pigment. This is a good way of getting a variety of colours. You can do it haphazardly, you can do it specifically if you want. You can use sticky earbuds to take off tiny parts of the colour. But if there's no colour on the silicone where you've taken it off, it can take another colour. Now I've used about 5 colours on this piece. Usually I'd only go for about 3 or 4, but I am so glad I've gone into more depth because look at that. It gives it so much more depth. You can see how beautifully different this piece now is. It's got a few colours in there and I think it is gorgeous. Again, this is only my personal opinion. I love it. This is my colour frame. This is my choice of colours. What colours would you choose? Now I have here another mould and I've sprayed this mould with isopropyl alcohol. Because it's then wet, I can move that silicone inlay around and get it in the right position. And because it's now dried out, all the alcohol has dried, that silicone has adhered to the silicone. Now you saw me using that big fluffy brush. That big fluffy brush is taking some of the colour from the painted inlay and transferring it into the mould to give it a kind of seamless effect, so that it actually looks as if it belongs, so that the colours in the mould now represent the colours on the piece. It's only going to be very light and very subtle, but it will be there. I fill this mould up with 2-part epoxy clear resin and I leave it to cure for 24 hours. The following day I can demould and I really love how this one looks. You can see that the inlay still had resin just seep underneath little tiny bits of edges, but it did better on this occasion than the glue did after waiting 4 days. But other than that, it came out beautifully and it's perfectly good to be used again. And the colour of the Tiny Toners pigments are stunning, and that's just with clear resin. I do like the way it's got that colour around the outside of it as well. Now I wanted to make this piece a little more vibrant, and to do that I could either completely cover the back in black or I could just fill in the eye inlay area. So I decided to use some black UV resin from Let's Resin. Give it a good stir in the bottle first to make sure that all that pigment is nicely in the UV resin. I know some people put metal balls in their pots so that they can spin it around. I'm quite happy to just stir it. Now this is when I realised that actually I don't have a lot of it. There's not much in this bottle. So I figured I'd just do a thin coat, because with black UV resin it does need layers so that it can cure properly. Light needs to go through UV resin to cure. Once that first part is done, you can really see how that kicks that colour out. And I really hope that I have enough black to actually finish the rest. Bearing in mind it is deep, so I need to go over the first bit as well first before I get to the outside edge. And I'm squeezing that bottle to the inch of its life, trying to get all that black colour out. Luckily I have some more on order, but it hadn't turned up at this point. In the end I decided to go round with a paintbrush and make sure that that black did reach the outer edges. The inlay is actually really quite thin at the edges, so maybe this was the better idea for it anyway, but I only just had enough. And it was just about. I could have done with just a fraction more, but we deal with what we have. I'll go over it with a long neck lighter before it goes under the lamp. And when it's completely cured, it is gorgeous. I love this. I absolutely love it. It's right up my street. It just screams. Now you can see that the back is a little bit thin. It could have done with being a little bit more flat towards the base, but as I said, I love it. I really do. So there's 3 ways to use an inlay. This Dragon Eye inlay is available on toonpish.com and will be available going forwards if you can't get it right now because you're in the USA. Don't worry, I will be back with sales hopefully soon. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I really hope you've got something out of it. Come back and see me next week, because you never know what I'm going to be up to. I never know what I'm going to be up to. Have a great week. Happy crafting, and bye for now.